They fined me $500 for feeding my family. Let me ask you a serious question. What would you do if a group of people tried to fine you for legally feeding your family? No drama. No illegal activity. Just putting food on the table the way your grandfather did. Because that's exactly what happened to me. It was a crisp, quiet fall morning. You know the kind. Mist hanging low, birds just waking up, and the forest alive with the sounds of rustling leaves and distant calls. I'd been out since dawn, perched in a spot I've hunted from for years. I live near a small, wooded area on the edge of town, a rural fringe where life moves slower, and neighbors mostly keep to themselves. My family's lived here a long time, and like my father before me, I hunt. Not for trophies, not for sport. I hunt to feed my family. Venison, turkey, rabbit, squirrel, it all gets used. We freeze what we can, smoke some, share the extra with neighbors. I've always done things by the book. I have my state hunting license. I follow all the seasonal guidelines, and I stay well away from any residential properties. I even carry out my shells and trash. I respect the land. So when I got a letter from the homeowners association delivered to my mailbox with a bright red stamp, I thought it was some kind of mistake. But no, they hit me with a $500 fine for disturbing community, peace, and engaging in dangerous activity. Dangerous? I was out in the woods, alone. There's not a single home for hundreds of yards in any direction. The land I was hunting on, it wasn't HOA property. In fact, it was open private land that the HOA had no legal authority over. I wasn't breaking a single law. So why the fine? I called and asked. Their answer? Your hunting activity makes residents feel unsafe. It's not in the spirit of our community standards. Community standards? Since when did that override state law? Since when did feelings become more powerful than facts? That's when it hit me. This wasn't about safety. It wasn't about laws or regulations. It was about control. And unfortunately for them, they picked the wrong person to mess with. The hypocrisy runs deep. Now here's the real kicker. The part that turned my frustration into full-blown disbelief. The HOA board president, Mr. Stevens, is what you'd call a nature enthusiast. He loves to talk about conservation, harmony with the outdoors, and preserving nature. Sounds nice, right? He even runs a Facebook group called Wilderness Walkers of Willow Ridge, where he posts smiling photos every Saturday of his group on their weekend wildlife hikes. But guess where they go hiking? Right through the same patch of forest I hunt in. Not next to it, not nearby, the exact same area. And here's the plot twist. They don't own that land either. The land is part of a large tract of private property, not included in the HOA's legal boundary. It's technically unmonitored. Forest land that's been passed down through a distant family, mostly unused and forgotten, except by people like me, who've respected and understood the value of it. But every Saturday, rain or shine, Mr. Stevens and his buddies park their cars along the edge of my property, open their trunks like it's a day at the park, leash up their golden retrievers and wander right in. No permission, no permits, no signs. And they treat it like their personal playground. They take selfies under old oak trees, stomp through creeks, leave behind snack wrappers and plastic bottles, and never clean up after their dogs. I've seen it myself. I've picked up after them more times than I can count. So let me get this straight. I hunt legally on land I have permission to be on. With all the right paperwork's our $500 fine. They trespass, hike on private land without permission, leave trash, let their dogs off leash, measure absolutely nothing. I decided to talk to Stevens directly, respectfully. I caught him one afternoon as he was leading his nature walk, and I said, "Hey, just so you know, that area you're hiking through, it's not HOA land, and you're technically trespassing." He didn't even flinch. Instead, he looked at me like I was the problem and said, "Hunting makes people uncomfortable. It's not in the spirit of our community." Oh, really? So me feeding my family is offensive. But you trampling through land you don't own is wholesome? That was the moment I knew this wasn't just hypocrisy. It was entitlement on full display, and I was done letting it slide. A bold idea hits me. Now look, I'm not a vengeful person. I don't go around looking for fights or drama. I've always believed in keeping the peace, living quietly and handling things the right way. But that $500 fine? That crossed a line. It wasn't just about the money. It felt personal, like they were targeting me to send a message. I'd never caused trouble, never missed a payment, never broke a single HOA rule. And yet, I was the one they chose to single out because I hunt. I couldn't stop thinking about the double standard. They hike on land that isn't theirs, leave behind garbage, and disturb wildlife, and that's fine. But I quietly, legally hunt a few times a year, and I get punished? So, one night after dinner, I opened up my laptop and started digging. I wanted to know exactly who owned the section of woods where they held their weekly hikes. I figured if I could get in touch with the landowners, maybe I could ask them to post no trespassing signs or at least limit access. What I found surprised me. The land wasn't owned by the HOA. It wasn't owned by the town. It was owned by a retired couple living in another state, Arizona to be exact. The property had been in their family for decades, passed down through an inheritance, but they hadn't been back to see it in years. They didn't live anywhere near it, and as it turns out, they had no idea that locals were using it as a public park. I gave them a call. Lovely people, sweet older, a bit overwhelmed that someone was even asking about the land. I explained the situation, that locals were trespassing, that the HOA was misusing it, and that I was interested in buying it. To my surprise, they were thrilled. It's just been sitting there for years, the husband said. If you want to make something of it, we'd be happy to sell it. We talked price, negotiated a little, and just like that, and within 3 weeks, that beautiful 40-acre parcel of forest was mine. I still remember the day I signed the papers. As I held the pen in my hand, I couldn't stop smiling. $65,000, and worth every single penny. Not just because I bought land, but because I finally held the upper hand. The sign that broke their smiles. Private property, no trespassing. Hiking permit revoked. Violators will be prosecuted. I marched out to the trailhead, the one they used every weekend like clockwork, and posted the sign right at the entrance. Then I added a second one near the parking area just to be safe. It was silent out there, peaceful, almost poetic. By 10:30 a.m., just as expected, I saw the caravan of familiar SUVs roll up. Doors opened. Hiking poles came out. Barking dogs jumped out of the back seats. Stevens and his crew looked like they were ready for another Instagram-worthy stroll through their woods. Then they saw the sign. They froze. You know that look people get when their brain is trying to catch up with what their eyes are reading? That was them, a mixture of confusion, denial, and slow-burning anger. Wait, what is this? One of them finally asked, eyebrows scrunched. I stepped out from my driveway, coffee in hand, leaned against my truck, and said calmly, You're standing on my property. Hike's over. Stevens's face went red. What are you talking about? We've been walking here for years. I smiled. Yeah, I know. On land that didn't belong to you. But it does now. I bought it. There was a pause. You could feel the shift. Then Stevens tried to play tough. This isn't over. I'm taking this to the HOA board. That's when I really had to laugh. Stevens, I said. This land has nothing to do with the HOA, just like my hunting area. This is private property. I'm my private property. And I'm enforcing the same principle you used against me. I gave him a little nod. Funny how private land works, huh? They left that day furious. Hike canceled. Weekend ruined. Faces redder than the maple leaves behind them. I guess the woods aren't so peaceful when you don't get to control them anymore. The bigger lesson. Look, let me be clear. I'm not against rules. I'm not against community, values, or even homeowner associations when they're run fairly. But what I am against is entitlement disguised as authority, because that's what this was from the beginning. A group of people, especially folks, like Stevens, using the HOA as their personal power trip. They weren't enforcing actual laws. They were inventing rules on the fly, punishing residents they didn't like, and flexing just because they thought no one would push back. And in most cases, they're right. Most people don't fight back. They pay the fine. They keep their heads down. They grumble but move on. But not me. See, I grew up learning that you don't let people bully you into silence, especially when you're doing nothing wrong. I had every legal right to hunt, every permit, every guideline followed. I was feeding my family the honest way, and yet they tried to shame me for it, punish me for it. So yes, I bought the land. And what did that $65,000 really buy me? Not just dirt and trees, not just 40 acres of woods. It bought me peace of mind. It bought me leverage. It bought me the satisfaction of watching people who once looked down on me suddenly realize they don't run everything. Let's break it down. They hit me with a $500 fine for doing something completely legal. In return, they lost their favorite hiking trails. They lost their moral high ground if they ever had it. And most importantly, they got a lesson in humility. Actions have consequences, and sometimes those consequences come with a deed and a no trespassing sign. Now, I'm not saying everyone should go out and buy land to prove a point. That's not always realistic. But what I am saying is this: stand up when you know you're right. You don't need to yell. You don't need to fight dirty. Sometimes a well-timed strategic move is louder than any argument. Today, I still hunt on my land. I still feed my family with pride. And every time I pass that trailhead and with its fresh yellow sign, I smile. Because it's not just about the land anymore. It's about the principle. Closing. Call to action. So, what do you think? Was I being petty? Or was it poetic justice? Let me know your thoughts in the comments. I read every single one. Have you ever had to deal with a power-hungry Cho-A or stand up for yourself in a creative way? Share your story. We might just feature it in a future video. If you enjoyed this tale of standing your ground, give it a like, hit subscribe, and don't forget to tap the bell icon so you never miss a real story with a real lesson. Thanks for watching. Stay smart, stay strong, and never let anyone walk over you. See you in the next one.